My son called me at 1 o'clock in the morning, voice trembling, begging for $35,000 because his wife needed emergency surgery and the hospital wouldn't operate without payment. And in that dark hour, I almost believed him, almost let guilt drag me from my bed until I heard her voice in the background whispering commands. In that moment, I made my decision. I said one word, no. Then I hung up, went to sleep. The next morning, the police called. But to be honest, could you have said no to your own child begging for help in the middle of the night? Most people can't. Prove me wrong in the comments. Everything started with a phone call at 10:07 a.m. I grabbed myself from the nightstand, heart already pounding. After 2 years of sleeping alone, I'd become a light sleeper. The red glow of the digital clock burned into my retinas as I answered. Dad? Jackson, my son. His voice cracked through the speaker, high and desperate. Dad, it's Heather. She needs emergency surgery. They need $35,000 right now or they won't operate. My chest tightened. Heather, my daughter-in-law. The woman who'd been part of our family for 6 years. Emergency surgery, $35,000. What hospital? I sat up, feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. Let me talk to the doctor. There's no time for that. His words tumbled over each other. Dad, please. She's in so much pain. They said if we don't transfer the money by 2:47 a.m. Shaw 247. Something in my engineer's brain. 40 years of checking calculations of knowing when numbers didn't add up started sending up red flags. That's oddly specific for an emergency. It's when the bank transfer window closes or something. I don't know. His voice pitched higher, frantic. Can you please just send it? I'd spent 38 years being the dad who said yes. Yes to little league fees we couldn't afford. Yes to college tuition. Yes to the down payment on his first house. But my late wife Helen had also taught me about foundations, about what holds and what crumbles. And Jackson listened to me. I kept my voice level. Take a breath. Tell me what's actually happening. What kind of surgery? Where is she? You don't believe me. His voice went flat. That's not what I bought. You never liked her. You and Mom, you always thought your mother loved Heather. I cut in. It was true. Helen had taken her to lunch every Thursday. Had trusted her with her grandmother's apple pie recipe. Had trusted her. Past tense hit like a punch. Yet Jackson, please just give me something. Anything that makes sense. I can't. His voice broke. Not like crying. Like breaking. Like someone had wrapped strings around his words and was pulling them tight. I need you to transfer the money, please, to the account I'm texting you right now. Let me talk to Heather. I tried again. Or a nurse, someone. She can't talk right now. They've got her prepped. Then I heard it through the phone. Static through whatever room he was calling from. I heard her voice in the background. Not weak, not frightened, not sedated, clear, calm, directing. I knew he'd say that. 7 words that changed everything. Not I knew he'd do that. Not talking to medical staff. She was talking about me, about my response, like she'd scripted this entire conversation. Like this was a performance and I'd just delivered my lines exactly as expected. My hand tightened around the phone, knuckles going white. Should call her father Jackson, I said quietly. The words came out steadier than I felt. If Heather needs $35,000 for emergency surgery, call Eugene. He has more money than I do. Silence. Then, Dad, I love you, son. But the answer is no. I hung up. The room swallowed me in darkness. Through the window, I could see the neighbor's security light casting shadows across the backyard. The same yard where Jackson used to build bridges out of sticks and mud, where Helen had planted roses that still bloomed every June. I just said no to my only child for the first time in 38 years. I waited for the guilt to come, for the crushing weight of what if I'm wrong. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. Like the first breath after almost drowning when the world snaps back into focus. Every structural engineer knows that moment when you're checking a bridge design and suddenly you see it. The flaw. The stress point that won't hold. The place where everything will fail if you don't act. I just heard that stress point crack. I knew he'd say that. My wife used to tease me about thinking too much like an engineer. Not everything is load calculations, Blake, she'd say. But she'd also squeeze my hand and add, I'm glad you know when something's about to collapse. I reached toward her side of the bed, still made untouched, except for my hand smoothing the covers each morning. My fingers found the edge of her pillow. I heard it, Helen, I whispered. I heard the crack. The phone screen glowed with a new text, an account number, routing information, instructions for a 2:47 a.m. transfer. I deleted it without reading past the first line. Then I lay back down, staring at the ceiling. My heart rate had slowed. The panic from Jackson's call had crystallized into something cold and clear. My son had just tried to manipulate me out of $35,000, or someone had manipulated him into thinking he needed to. Either way, the foundation was failing, and I just refused to pour concrete into a crack. The guilt never came. Only clarity remained. I closed my eyes and waited for dawn. In a few hours, that clarity would be tested in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But for now, in the 10:07 a.m. darkness of my Pittsburgh bedroom, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Something was very, very wrong with my daughter-in-law, and I was going to find out what. 5 hours later, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee I'd poured, but never touched. Gray dawn light crept through the window, painting everything in shades of doubt. The house felt different without Helen, not just empty but off balance like a bridge missing a support beam. This kitchen table had been our morning ritual for 40 years. Her chair across from me still sat at the exact angle she'd left it 2 years ago this past April. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice through the phone static. The clock on the microwave blinked to 7 Noro, just as my phone rang. Unknown number. My first thought. Here comes the next piece. Mr. Carter. A man's voice. Calm. Professional. Not unkind. This is Officer Kevin Torres with the Allegheny County Police Department. We need to discuss a situation involving your family. My hand tightened around the phone. I'm listening. At approximately 1:15 a.m. this morning, a 911 call was placed from your son's residence. Torres spoke with the careful precision of someone who delivered this kind of news many times. The caller reported a female at that address experiencing a cardiac emergency 8 minutes after Jackson hung up on me. Paramedics were dispatched immediately, Torres continued. When they arrived, no one answered the door. No patient was located. We've checked with every hospital within a 50-mile radius. No one matching the description was admitted last night. My coffee had gone cold, but I gripped the mug anyway. What description? The 911 caller provided your insurance information, Mr. Carter. Your policy number, your date of birth. They claimed the patient was your daughter-in-law, Heather Carter. There it was. Confirmation that I wasn't paranoid, wasn't overreacting. There's more, Torres said. Between 2:00 and 4:00 a.m. this morning, someone attempted to access your insurance portal 3 times. All 3 attempts failed. Wrong password, but the system logged the IP address. I set the mug down carefully, and the IP address traces back to your son's residence, Mr. Carter. The kitchen seemed to tilt. Not because I was surprised, because now it was real. Not just a suspicious phone call. Not just a father's instinct. This was systematic, planned, not desperation calculation. I've worked elder financial abuse cases for 12 years, Torres said, and something in his voice shifted. Not pity, recognition. This is a pattern I've seen before. The emergency call, the specific dollar amount, the pressure, the attempt to access accounts when the target refuses. What happens next? I asked. Officially, we're investigating the fraudulent 911 call. That's a crime. He paused. Unofficially, Mr. Carter, I'm calling to tell you to protect yourself. Freeze your credit immediately. Change every password. Don't sign anything. Don't transfer any money. Not to anyone. Noted. Want one more thing? Torres's voice dropped lower. Whoever's doing this knows you very well. Your routines, your finances, your relationships. They've done their homework. Maybe, I said quietly, but they don't know me as well as they think they do. A beat of silence. Then Mr. Carter, if you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me directly. He gave me his cell number. Cases like this, they escalate. I want you to be careful. I appreciate that. Officer Torres, one question before I go, he said. The person who made that 911 call, did you recognize the voice? I thought about lying, about protecting Jackson, about giving him the benefit of doubt. Then I thought about Helen, about the promises we'd made to each other, about the foundation we'd built on truth. It wasn't my son's voice on that 911 call, was it? I asked instead. No, sir, it was a female caller. I closed my eyes. Thank you for letting me know. After Torres hung up, I sat in the growing daylight and let my engineer's mind do what it does best to analyze the problem. Identify the weak points, design a solution. This wasn't about one phone call anymore. This was infrastructure, a carefully constructed framework of deception built on access and trust and intimate knowledge of exactly which buttons to push, the fake emergency, the specific deadline, the insurance information, the portal attempts. Someone had been planning this, and the only person with that level of access to my life was the woman who'd been calling me dad for 6 years. I stood up, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and pulled out a legal pad from the drawer where Helen used to keep her grocery lists. At the top of the first page, I wrote the date and time, October 15, 2025, 7:23 a.m. Then I started documenting everything. The 107 a.m. call, the whisper, the 911 attempt, the insurance breach, Torres's number and case reference. My late wife used to joke that I over-engineered everything. You can't blueprint your way through life, Blake, she'd say, smiling over her morning tea. But she'd also taught me that some structures need precise calculations. That some problems require methodical step-by-step solutions, that some bridges need to be burned before they collapse and take innocent people down with them. Officer Torres had been right about one thing. Whoever was behind this knew me very well. But what they didn't know was that I'd spent 40 years designing structures that could withstand pressure, that I understood load-bearing limits and stress points, and exactly how much force it takes to bring something down. And I was about to apply every lesson I'd ever learned. By 9 o'clock, I was in Torres's patrol car heading downtown. Fall leaves scattered across Liberty Avenue, Pittsburgh, waking to a Tuesday that looked like any other. It wasn't. We parked near Point State Park, the fountain already drawing morning joggers. PNC Bank's downtown branch sat in a building I'd passed 1,000 times back when banking meant depositing paychecks, not documenting theft. Patricia met us in a private office. She'd been my branch manager for 15 years, had processed Helen's life insurance payout with quiet efficiency 2 years ago. We'd never needed police present before. Mr. Carter. She shook my hand, then Torres's, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. Let me pull up your accounts. She turned to her monitor, fingers flying across the keyboard. I watched her face, watched the exact moment professionalism shifted to concern. Oh. Her voice went flat. Oh no. What is it? I leaned forward. Patricia swiveled the screen toward me. There's a pending transaction on your primary checking account initiated at 2:47 this morning. The time hit me first 47 a.m. exactly when Jackson had demanded the transfer deadline. How much? Torres asked. $35,000. Patricia scrolled down. Flagged by our fraud system due to unusual timing and an unrecognized device. It's currently frozen pending verification. My mouth went dry. I didn't authorize that. I assumed not. She clicked something else. But Mr. Carter, there's more. The screen changed. A different account appeared, one I'd never seen before. And this is a line of credit in your name, Patricia said carefully. Opened 4 months ago. Credit limit of $75,000. 4 months right after Thanksgiving. Right. When Heather had insisted on helping me organize my finances after Helen's passing, current balance drawn, Torres was already taking notes. Patricia's jaw tightened. $68,000. The office tilted. Not the pending $35,000 I'd refused at 107 a.m. $68,000 already gone. That's impossible, I said. I never opened that account. The application shows an authorized user. Patricia pulled up another screen. Heather Quinn listed as your daughter-in-law. Monthly statements are mailed to a P.O. box in Houston, Texas. Houston, not Pittsburgh. Not my address. Can I see the application? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Patricia printed the documents, slid them across the desk. I stared at the signature line at the bottom. My name Blake Carter, but not my signature. I'd signed my name thousands of times over 40 years on blueprints, on contracts, on the deed to our house, on Helen's death certificate. I knew the exact angle of the B, the slight hesitation before the C, the way the R always sat lower than it should. The signature was too round, too even, too perfect. That's not my handwriting, I said. Torres leaned over. Forged. Scanned application uploaded online, Patricia confirmed. We never received a physical original. When were the draws made? Torres asked. Patricia scrolled through the transaction history. Small amounts at first, $2,000 here, $1,500 there, then larger $10,000, $20,000. The pattern escalated over the past 4 months. Testing defenses, Torres said quietly. Small probing attacks to see what gets noticed. When nothing does, they get bolder. I stared at the numbers. $68,000 stolen while I was grieving my wife. While I was trying to hold myself together. While Heather was bringing me casseroles and asking how I was doing and calling me dad. Mr. Carter, Torres's voice cut through the fog. This is textbook escalation in elder financial abuse cases. They start with access authorized user status joint accounts, power of attorney documents. Then they begin systematic extraction. And the end goal in these cases is almost always the same. What goal? I asked, though some part of me already knew. Guardianship. Torres met my eyes. Once they establish a pattern of you being incapacitated or unable to manage your affairs, they petition for legal guardianship. And once they control your legal decisions, they control everything. Your home, your retirement, your medical care, everything. The architecture of the con suddenly crystallized, not desperate theft, strategic construction, the emergency call establishing crisis, the insurance fraud creating paper trail of confusion, the credit line proving financial mismanagement. Each piece designed to build a case that Blake Carter, 68, retired engineer, couldn't handle his own affairs anymore. How much total? I heard myself ask. Patricia calculated quickly. $68,000 already withdrawn, $35,000 pending. That's $13,000 direct exposure with interest and fees on the credit line. She typed closer to $110,000. $110,000. More than Helen's life insurance payout. More than our first house had cost. More than I'd saved in my first decade of working. What can we do? My voice came out steady, engineer calm, even as my hands shook. I'm filing a fraud report immediately, Patricia said, already typing, freezing the credit line, reversing the pending transfer. But, Mr. Carter, this $68,000 that's already been withdrawn and spent recovery is uncertain. We'll try, but these cases are complicated. We'll need a police report, Torres added. Full documentation. This is going to be a process. Patricia printed forms. Torres made calls. I sat in that office and watched the numbers on the screen. $68,000, $35,110,000 and felt something inside me harden. Not just anger at Heather, anger at myself. How had I missed this? The extra attention after Helen died. The offers to help with paperwork, the insistence on being added to accounts just in case of emergency. I'd been grateful, relieved that someone cared. I'd been a fool, Mr. Carter. Patricia held out a folder. These are copies of everything. The fraud report, the forged application, the transaction history. You'll need these. I took the folder, stood, shook her hand. Torres and I walked out of the bank into October sunlight. That felt too bright, too normal. Downtown Pittsburgh moved around us. People heading to work, buying coffee, living ordinary Tuesdays. My jaw was set so tight it arched. You okay? Torres asked. No, I said, but I will be. Because the thing about being an engineer is you learn to see the whole structure, the foundation, the supports, the stress points. You learn where it's weak, where it's strong, and exactly where to apply pressure to bring it down. Heather had spent 4 months building her con. I was going to spend however long it took dismantling it. When I left that bank, I thought losing money was the worst part. I was wrong. The financial theft was just the surface. What lay beneath would force me to question everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd welcomed into my family. The drive home took me through streets I'd known for decades. Liberty Avenue to Bigelow, past the museums and universities where I'd taught night classes in the 80s. But the city felt different now, like Pittsburgh itself had shifted slightly off its foundation while I wasn't paying attention. Or maybe I was the one who'd shifted. Alone in the car, my mind drifted without permission. Not choosing memories, they came anyway. Moments I dismissed, explained away, forgiven. The pattern had been there all along. Helen's funeral 2 years ago. I'd stood beside her casket numb, clutching the blue scarf she'd worn every autumn. People murmured condolences and hushed voices, brought casseroles I'd never eat, told me time would heal. Heather had approached, not with flowers, not with sympathy. And Blake, when things settled down, we should discuss the house for planning purposes. I'd been too hollowed out to process the words, too grief-stricken to recognize the wrongness of raising estate planning at my wife's funeral. I'd thought it was awkward concern, practical help from someone who cared. Now I saw it clearly. She'd started calculating before Helen was even buried. Thanksgiving last year. Heather had arrived with a folder of documents, just estate planning updates. Dad, nothing complicated. I'd signed page 1, page 2, page 3. Standard stuff, beneficiary updates, medical directives. Then page 4. Language about decision-making authority in the event of incapacity. Something had made me pause. An engineer's instinct recognizing faulty architecture. I'd like my attorney to review this first. Heather's smile hadn't reached her eyes. Of course, Dad. Whatever makes you comfortable. But something had flickered across her face too fast, to name too subtle to call out. She'd gathered the papers and never mentioned them again. I'd forgotten about it. Buried under holiday busyness and the fog of grief. Now I understood she'd been testing, seeing if I'd sign without reading. When I didn't, she'd filed it away and moved to other strategies. Christmas dinner. Heather had walked through my house, touching furniture, running her fingers along Helen's antique sideboard. This place is charming. Must be worth a lot in this neighborhood. Questions about when I'd bought it, what comparable homes were selling for whether I'd ever considered downsizing. I'd answered, thinking she was making conversation. Now I saw it for what it was. Appraisal, inventory, asset assessment. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the silent car. The script had been written for months. I just hadn't been reading it. Helen must have seen it. That's why she'd asked those careful questions before the cancer took her speech. Are you sure about Heather handling your accounts? Maybe we should keep things separate. I told her not to worry. Told her Heather was family. Helen had known better. My phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. You think you can stop me? You don't know what I'm capable of. This ends when I say it ends. I stared at the screen. The wording, the tone. I recognized Heather's voice, even in text. Before I could respond, another message arrived from a different number. I don't trust anyone around her, but my chest tightened. The first message was pure threat confirmation that Heather knew I'd figured her out. The second was something else. A warning from someone who wanted to help. But who was a friend or another threat wearing a friendly mask? Instinct told me friend, someone trying to warn me. I saved both numbers. Didn't respond to either. Then I got out of the car and walked to my front door. The door I'd walked through thousands of times, carrying Helen over the threshold 42 years ago, carrying Jackson in from the hospital, carrying groceries and blueprints, and all the ordinary weight of a life. The house suddenly felt less safe than it had that morning. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every creak of old floorboards sounded like an intruder. But Blake Carter hadn't spent 4 decades designing structures by running from problems. I solved them. I locked the door behind me and stood in the entryway, the same entryway where Helen and I had hung Christmas stockings, where we'd photographed Jackson before prom, where we'd built a life on foundations I'd thought were solid. 2 text messages, 2 completely different voices. One from the enemy I'd now identified, one from an alley I couldn't yet name. But before I could figure out what either meant, they were already coming to my door. Morning arrived cold and bright. I was pouring coffee when the pounding started, sharp, aggressive knocks that rattled the front door in its frame. 9 o'clock exactly, precise, hostile. I set down the pot and walked to the door, already knowing who I'd find. Heather stood on my front porch, tears streaming down her face, makeup smeared, breathing in ragged gasps. The performance had begun. Behind her, Jackson stood pale and silent, unable to meet my eyes. "How could you, Blake?" Her voice trembled with manufactured hurt. "I was dying. Dying. And you hung up on your own son." She pushed past me into the living room without waiting for an answer. Jackson followed like a shadow. "What kind of father does that? What kind of person?" I closed the door and turned to face her, keeping my voice level. "You weren't dying, Heather." "Huh? What are you talking about?" "I was in the hospital." "No." I stayed calm. Engineer steady. "No hospital within 50 miles admitted anyone matching your description that night. The 911 call was fake. Paramedics found no one." I watched her face carefully, looking for the crack. For half a second, something cold flickered behind her eyes. Calculation, assessment, then more tears. "Blake, you're confused. You're under so much stress. This isn't like you." I walked to the coffee table and picked up the bank statements I'd printed that morning. Laid them out slowly, deliberately. A $75,000 line of credit. Opened 4 months ago. Your name as authorized user. I pointed to the next page. Monthly statements mailed to a P.O. box in Houston. Then the application. A signature supposedly mine. Except it's forged. Jackson's face went white. Real shock, or was he that good an actor? "Dad, I don't understand." Heather reached for him. "Jackson, your father is clearly not well." "I know my own signature, Heather." My voice stayed flat, factual. 40 years of presenting engineering reports had taught me how to deliver uncomfortable truths without emotion. She pivoted victim to concerned caregiver in 3 seconds flat. Her tone shifted, became clinically cold. "Blake, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You're forgetting things, getting confused, making baseless accusations." She turned to Jackson. "You see what I'm saying? He's not okay, and we need to do something to protect him from himself." I straightened, pulling myself up to full height. "I'm not confused, and I'm not signing anything. I've frozen my credit, changed all my passwords, filed a police report." I met her eyes. "Whatever you're planning, it's over." The mask fell away completely. Cold settled over her features like frost forming on glass. "No more tears. No more performance." Her voice went flat. "Certain. I already filed with the court, Blake, to petition for emergency guardianship. Emergency hearing in 2 weeks." She stepped closer and I saw something in her face I'd never noticed before. Not anger, not even malice. Victory. "You're a danger to yourself. Mentally incapacitated. That in 30 days you won't be able to make a single decision on your own." The smile that crossed her lips was small, controlled, triumphant. I looked at my son, searching for an ally. For the boy I'd raised, the man who'd stood with me at Helen's funeral. Jackson stared at the floor, frozen between us, not defending me, not supporting her, just paralyzed. "Jackson." I tried to reach him. He didn't look up. Heather turned toward the door, Jackson following mechanically. She paused at the threshold. "See you in court, Blake." The door slammed shut behind them. I stood alone in my living room, hearing the echo of her words. 30 days. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about autonomy, dignity, freedom. Guardianship would make me a legal child. Heather would control where I lived, what I ate, whether I could leave my own house. Every decision, every moment, every remaining year of my life, hers to dictate. Everything Helen and I had built, everything we'd worked for, saved, for dreamed of, gone. I walked to the fireplace mantel and picked up Helen's photograph, the one from our 40th anniversary. Her smile bright and real and forever frozen at 64. "I need your help, sweetheart," I whispered to her face. "I need to find what you left me," because somewhere in the fog of those final weeks when Helen could barely speak, but her eyes were still sharp, still seeing, she'd made arrangements. She'd known. Somehow Helen had known. And she'd left me a weapon. I just had to find it. 30 days to prove I was still the man I'd always been. 30 days before Heather could take everything. But I had one advantage she didn't know about. Helen had seen her coming, and my wife had left me prepared. Back home, the house felt emptier than ever. I sat at the kitchen table where Helen and I had shared morning coffee for 40 years and finally let myself remember her final words. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. 3 days before Helen died, the hospital room had been 2 bright fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of antiseptic sharp enough to burn. Helen had looked so small in that bed, the blue scarf wrapped around her head where her hair used to be. I'd held her hand, feeling how fragile her bones had become. Like bird wings, like paper. Her eyes had opened lucid, startlingly clear, despite the morphine. She'd squeezed my hand with what little strength remained. "Blake," her voice barely a whisper. "If anything happens, find Irene. She has what you need." I'd nodded, throat too tight for words. I'd thought it was the medication talking. Confusion born of pain and drugs and the cancer eating through her brain. But Helen had never been confused. Not even at the end. Now in my kitchen, I understood Helen hadn't been confused. She'd been preparing. She'd known something was wrong with Heather. Known before I did, before anyone did. And she'd left me tools to fight. I just had to find them. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. No more waiting. No more reacting. Time to take action. Irene Powell lived 15 minutes away in the Pittsburgh suburbs. A small cedar-sided house with a garden that still bloomed in October. I'd been here dozens of times with Helen. Thursday lunches, birthday parties, quiet afternoons drinking tea. I rang the doorbell. Irene opened the door, saw my face, and there was no surprise in her expression. Only recognition. "Helen said you'd come when you really needed it." She led me inside without another word, disappeared into a back room. When she returned, she carried a fireproof box, her hands trembling slightly. "She gave me this 6 months before she passed." Irene set the box on her dining table. "Made me promise protect it with my life. Only give it to Blake when the time was right." "How did you know the time was right?" I asked. "I didn't, but Helen said I would." Irene's eyes were bright with tears. "She said you'd look exactly like this." "And like what?" "Like a man who just discovered he's fighting ghosts." She opened the box with a small key from her pocket. Inside 3 items waited. The first thing I saw was legal documents. I lifted them out with shaking hands. Irrevocable trust dated 8 months before Helen died. Before the diagnosis. Before the rapid decline. Before we'd even known she was sick. I read through the pages, lawyer language slowly crystallizing into meaning. Every major asset. The house, retirement accounts, investments, all protected. The trust was structured so that Heather couldn't touch any of it. Not with guardianship. Not with power of attorney. Not with anything. Even if a court declared me incompetent tomorrow, these assets were locked away in a legal fortress Helen had built. She'd protected everything we'd worked for. Everything we'd built together. Tears blurred my vision. Helen had known. She'd seen what I'd missed. Loved me enough to fight battles I hadn't even seen coming. She was so smart, Irene whispered. So careful. The second item was a USB drive. Small silver labeled in Helen's precise handwriting. For Blake when the time comes below that I'm always with you, my love." I stared at those words until they swam. Her handwriting, the careful loops of the B, the way she always made the little heart above the I in width. Not ready to watch it. Not yet. The wound was too fresh, too raw. The third item was a thick file folder. I opened it to find pages and pages of handwritten notes. Helen's neat script, dated entries, observations I didn't understand, printouts with sections highlighted, research, background checks on Heather, phone numbers I didn't recognize, names I'd never heard, and paperclip to the front one sheet with a single line. "Her father isn't dead. Find him." I looked up at Irene. She was investigating Heather as she knew something was wrong with that woman. "Blake," Irene's voice cracked. "She spent her final months making sure you had everything you'd need." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Helen loved you so much." I stood and hugged her, the first real human connection I'd felt since this nightmare began. "Thank you," I whispered, "for keeping your promise, for being her friend. You fight for her, Blake." Irene pulled back, gripping my shoulders. "Fight for both of you." I drove home with the box secure in the passenger seat. Helen's handwriting on the USB seemed to glow in the afternoon light. I wasn't ready to hear her voice again. Wasn't ready for whatever message she'd recorded. The pain was still too sharp, but knowing it existed, knowing she was still fighting beside me, that changed everything. The research file sat on top. Phone numbers, names, background research I didn't understand yet. And that note, her father isn't dead. Find him. I didn't know what it meant, didn't know where to start. But Helen had given me the tools, protected our assets, left me a map. All I had to do was follow it. The USB drive sat beside me for the entire drive home. I wasn't ready to press play. Not yet. The grief was still too raw, the wound too fresh. But I knew that whatever Helen had recorded, whenever I found the strength to listen, it would give me the answers I needed. I just didn't know how much those answers would cost me. That evening, with darkness pressing against the windows and the house silent around me, I finally found the courage. I sat in the study, Helen's favorite room where she'd kept her books and her sewing and the photos of our life together, and plugged in the USB. The screen flickered to life, and Helen appeared. My breath caught in my throat. She was in the hospital bed, pale and thin, the blue scarf covering where her hair had been. But her eyes, God, her eyes were burning, determined, alive in a way that made my chest ache. The recording was steady, professional. A nurse must have helped her, my love. Her voice was weaker than I remembered, but clear. If you're watching this, Heather has made her move. I'm sorry I'm not there to fight beside you, but I've done everything I can to make sure you have what you need. She paused, gathering strength. 3 months before I got sick, Heather came to see me. You were at the doctor, that appointment for your shoulder. She said she wanted to discuss estate planning. Helen's expression tightened at the memory. Yeah, she had documents prepared. Blake, professional folders, all official looking. She wanted me to sign papers transferring the house title to Jackson's name. For tax purposes, she said. I told her, I'd never sign anything without you present. Helen leaned closer to the camera and I saw something fierce flash in her eyes, and that's when I saw it. Her reaction when I refused. Not disappointment, Blake. Rage. Cold, controlled, calculated. An expression I'd never seen on her face before, like the mask had slipped for just a second. Helen's voice dropped lower. She said, one way or another, I'll get what I deserve, and your husband won't be able to stop me. My hands clenched on the desk. But that's when I started investigating. Helen's jaw set with determination. I contacted our lawyer immediately. Set up the irrevocable trust. Every asset protected. She can't touch the house. Can't touch the retirement accounts. Even if she gets guardianship, even if she forges your signature, the trust is untouchable. I made sure of it. She paused, catching her breath. But I did more than that. I hired a private investigator. Used money from an account you didn't know about, one I'd kept separate just in case. A small, sad smile. 42 years of marriage, and I still had my secrets. The investigator found contradictions in Heather's background. Blake. Helen pulled papers into frame, pointing to highlighted sections. Now, that story about her father dying when she was young, it's a lie. Her father is alive, living in Florida. His name is Eugene Quinn. Last known address, Clearwater. She told us he was dead, but he's not. And I think I can't prove it, but I think Helen stopped collecting herself. I don't think we're her first victims, my love. The investigator found name changes, gaps in her history. She's careful, but not perfect. Dig deeper. The truth about her past is the key. She leaned back against the pillows, exhausted, but not finished. I'm still protecting you even now. You've spent our entire marriage giving and giving, never asking for anything in return. That's beautiful, Blake. That's who you are. But kindness without boundaries is an invitation to be exploited. She let those words sink in. But now you know how to be both kind and strong. That's the lesson. Her expression softened. Don't close your heart after this. Don't let her poison you. Jackson needs his father. I know he's disappointed you, but he's still our son, the boy we raised before she sank her hooks into him. Be patient. Be steadfast. Keep the door open. Helen reached toward the camera, her hand trembling with effort. Fight, Blake. You're stronger than you think. When everything you need is in that box, use it. A smile, small but genuine. And Blake, plant those yellow roses. The ones I didn't get to live. Really live. That's all I ever wanted for you. The screen went dark. I sat in the silent study, tears streaming down my face. I played the video again just to hear her voice. A third time. A fourth. Finally, I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness. Helen had fought for me even while dying. Had loved me enough to prepare weapons I'd need. Had known Heather's nature before I'd seen it. Grief, gratitude, determination. All three crashed through me in waves. Helen had given me armor. Legal protection that couldn't be broken. Helen had given me a sword, information about Heather's past. Helen had given me purpose, finish what she'd started. I wiped my eyes and opened the research file. Helen's handwriting filled the margins, notes, questions, leads to follow. At the top of the first page, her father, Eugene Quinn. Last known address, Clearwater, Florida. Helen had given me a name. A father who was supposed to be dead. A thread to pull that might unravel everything Heather had built. But before I could begin searching, my phone rang. Officer Torres. And the news he delivered froze my blood. Morning light crept through the windows, but I barely noticed. The phone rang at 8 o'clock sharp. Officer Torres, and his tone made my chest tighten. Mr. Carter, she filed yesterday afternoon. Emergency guardianship petition at Allegheny County Court. Claims you're mentally incapacitated. A direct danger to yourself. The hearing was scheduled for exactly 2 weeks, expedited due to the emergency nature. I have a copy of the petition, Torres continued. And Mr. Carter, you need to see what she submitted. My hand tightened around the phone. What kind of evidence to photos? Papers rustled on his end. Pictures labeled as Blake Carter's kitchen. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, trash overflowing, spoiled food on the counter. But that's not my kitchen. The words came out flat, certain. I've never seen those photos in my life. I know they're clearly staged, but the judge doesn't know that yet. What else? There's witness statements from 3 neighbors. He read the names. I recognize none of them. They claim you've been wandering the neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning, confused, talking to yourself. My jaw clenched. Not one says you knocked on their door asking for Helen. Torres paused. Your wife who passed 2 years ago. Another claims, you forgot your way home and police had to escort you back. That's completely fabricated. Anger burned hot in my chest. I've never met these people. Never wandered anywhere. Never needed police escort. I believe you, Torres said. But there's more. A letter from Dr. Robert Simmons, your personal physician. It expresses serious concerns about Mr. Carter's cognitive decline and recommends immediate intervention for his own safety. My hands started shaking. I saw Dr. Simmons 3 months ago for my annual checkup. He said I was in excellent health. He would never write that. I know, Mr. Carter. Everything here is fabricated. We can prove it, but here's the problem. Judges in these cases tend to err on the side of caution. Torres's voice grew heavier. They see a worried family member, an elderly man living alone. They don't want to be the judge who denied a petition, and then something happened. These cases tend to favor intervention. Better safe than sorry. The weight of his words settled over me like ice. If she wins, I couldn't finish the sentence. If she wins, she becomes your legal guardian. Torres didn't soften it. She makes all your decisions. Medical care, living arrangements, finances. She can sell your house, drain your bank accounts. He didn't know about Helen's trust yet. Heather didn't either. She can place you in a facility against your will. You become the legal equivalent of a minor child, Mr. Carter. No autonomy, no dignity, no control over your own life. I stood up, walked to the window. The street outside looked normal. Neighbors getting mail, kids waiting for the school bus, life continuing like the world hadn't just tilted on its axis. For the first time, I felt the full weight of being 68, of living alone, of being a widower. On paper, Heather's concern would look reasonable to a stranger. And what if the judge doesn't see through it? The question came out quieter than I meant. What if 2 weeks isn't enough time and then we make it enough? Torres's voice turned firm. You need a lawyer, Mr. Carter. A good one. Someone who specializes in elder law. You need a psychiatric evaluation from a credible expert proving competency. We need to debunk the fake evidence. I'll track down these neighbors. Prove they don't exist or were paid off. We need a sworn statement from the real Dr. Simmons contradicting that forged letter. No, 2 weeks. We have 2 weeks to build an airtight case. I looked at Helen's photo on my desk. She'd prepared for this, the trust protecting our assets. But I wouldn't just play defense. I'd attack, find out who Heather really was, use Helen's clues, finish what my wife had started. Thank you, Officer Torres. Don't thank me yet, he said. Just when? After he hung up, I stood in the morning light and let the reality sink in. 2 weeks to prove I was still the man I'd always been. 14 days to build a defense. But I'd learned something from 40 years of engineering. The best defense is a foundation so strong nothing can shake it, and an offense precise enough to bring down any structure, no matter how carefully built. I opened my laptop and started searching for lawyers. The war had truly begun. 2 weeks to build a defense. But I understood now that defense alone wouldn't be enough. If I wanted to beat Heather, I needed to become something she'd never anticipated, a man who fought smarter than she'd planned for. And that meant assembling allies she didn't know existed. From the study with Helen's files spread across the desk like battle plans, I began making calls. 2 days, 14 phone calls, 3 meetings. By the end of day 6, I'd assembled the first pieces of my counteroffensive. Day 5, finding Caroline Wright. I'd spent the morning researching elder abuse attorneys in Pittsburgh. One name kept appearing: Caroline Wright. 20 years of experience, a reputation for being fierce, uncompromising, and brutally effective. Her office was at PPG Place, the iconic glass tower in downtown Pittsburgh. I called, explained the situation in 30 seconds. Come in today, she said, no hesitation. This can't wait. Meeting Caroline, day 5, afternoon. Her office was what I'd expected. Professional walls lined with law books and degrees from Georgetown and Pitt. But what I hadn't expected was the warmth in her handshake. The way she listened without interrupting as I told my story. She reviewed Helen's trust documents first. After 5 minutes of reading, she looked up with a slight smile. "Your wife was brilliant, Mr. Carter. But this trust is a fortress. Even with guardianship, Heather can't touch these assets. Not the house, not the retirement accounts, not a single investment. She probably doesn't know that yet, which gives us a significant advantage." Then Caroline spread out the guardianship petition, the fake photos, the witness statements, the forged doctor's letter. "This is fraud." Her voice went cold precise. "Blatant prosecutable fraud. When we're going to dismantle this in court," but she warned, "judges in these cases are cautious. They don't want to make a mistake. We need to prove beyond any doubt that you're completely competent." Her strategy was threefold. First, psychiatric evaluation, full cognitive testing. "I'll refer you to Dr. Hannah Stevens, 30 years of experience, testifies regularly." Second, we countersue, expose the fraud. "The photos are fake. Wrong house provable. The witnesses are fake. They don't exist. We'll prove it. The doctor's letter is forged. The real Dr. Simmons will provide a sworn affidavit." The third, we go on offense. Financial fraud charges against Heather. Elder abuse charges. By the time we're done, the judge won't just deny her petition. She leaned forward. "They'll be asking why she's not in handcuffs." I asked the question that had been gnawing at me. How did she think she could get away with this? Caroline sat back. "Because she's done it before, Mr. Carter. So these schemes are too polished, too professional to be a first attempt. She's practiced this, maybe succeeded before." Helen's warning echoed. "Not our first victims." Day 6, Dr. Hannah Stevens. The next morning, I drove to Dr. Stevens's office in Shadyside. Modern building, warm waiting room that felt more like a living room than a medical facility. Dr. Stevens was in her 50s, kind-faced, but with sharp assessing eyes that missed nothing. "Let's see what we're working with, Mr. Carter." The evaluation took 90 minutes. Memory testing. She read me lists of words, strings of numbers, detailed scenarios, asked me to recall them minutes later, then again at the end. I remembered everything, every word, every digit, every detail. "What did you eat for breakfast 3 days ago?" I described it exactly. Steel-cut oatmeal with blueberries, black coffee, whole wheat toast. Even remembered the news story I'd read that morning. A bridge inspection downtown had found structural issues, reasoning tests, logic puzzles, problem-solving scenarios. I worked through them methodically, my engineer's mind still sharp, still systematic. If all roses are flowers and some flowers fade quickly, can we conclude that some roses fade quickly? No. That's a logical fallacy. We know roses are flowers, but we don't know if roses are part of the subset of flowers that fade quickly. A slight smile from Dr. Stevens. "Correct. Current events." We discussed politics, local news, world issues. I was coherent, informed, could argue multiple perspectives. Financial literacy. I explained my budget, my investments, my retirement plans, walked her through the fraud. Heather had committed the amounts, the timeline, clear, organized, precise, daily living. I described my routines, cooking, cleaning, managing the house, maintaining the yard, driving safely, independent, capable, social relationships. I mentioned Officer Torres, my neighbors Irene, the Thursday lunches Helen and I used to have with friends before she got sick. Dr. Stevens put down her pen and looked at me with something like admiration. "Mr. Carter, you're sharper than most people half your age. Your memory is excellent. Your reasoning is logical. Your judgment is intact. You manage your affairs competently. You maintain social connections. You show appropriate emotional responses. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your mind." She signed the evaluation form, handed it to me. "Whoever filed that petition is either seriously mistaken or deliberately lying. I'll testify to this in court if needed." Her eyes hardened, "And I'll make it very clear which one I think it is." Relief washed through me. Not just validation, but ammunition. Hard evidence to counter Heather's lies, but also realization. If she was willing to fabricate this completely, what else had she done? Evening day, 6. Follow up with Caroline. I brought the signed evaluation to Caroline's office. She reviewed it, nodded with satisfaction. "This is exactly what we need." Who combined with exposing her fake evidence. Her petition is dead on arrival. Then she outlined additional strategy. "We're also filing a harassment complaint. Those threatening texts she sent you requesting a restraining order establishing a pattern of threats, fraud, abuse." Caroline looked up from the documents. "Mr. Carter, by the time this hearing happens, you will be on offense. She will be defending herself." I'd entered this fight feeling like a victim. I was leaving Caroline's office feeling like a warrior. I had Armor Helen's trust legal protection that couldn't be breached. I had weapons fraud, evidence, proof of competency, a lawyer who fought like Helen would have wanted. I had allies Caroline Torres, Dr. Stevens, But I knew one thing: I was still missing pieces. The truth about Heather's past. Who she really was. Who she'd hurt before. I drove home as the sun set over Pittsburgh, painting the city in amber and shadow. 2 weeks suddenly felt like enough time. I had my defense. Now I needed intelligence. Time to dig deeper into Helen's files and find out who Heather really was. I had a defense. I had proof of my competency. But defense only wins by not losing. I needed something more. Something that could expose Heather completely. And that meant finding the people she'd hurt before me. The ones who'd been waiting years for someone to finally listen. Morning of day 7. I sat at the kitchen table reviewing Helen's files when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the window, I saw Claire Thompson, my neighbor, looking anxious. Claire was 67, had lived 3 houses down for 15 years. She'd been Helen's friend Thursday lunches book club. The quiet companionship of women who'd known each other through decades. I opened the door. "Clara, is everything okay?" "Blake, I need to tell you something." Her hands twisted together. "I saw something that night and it's been haunting me." I let her inside. She sat on the couch, hands still moving nervously. "The night after you refused the $35,000 around midnight, I couldn't sleep. My old dog was sick, needed to go out. I was walking him on the street when I saw Heather outside Jackson's house. My chest tightened. And she wasn't sick, Blake." Claire met my eyes. She was perfectly healthy, walking normally. No sign of pain or distress. What was she doing? "Meeting someone." Claire described it carefully. A man parked down the street in a dark sedan waiting. Heather walked to his car, got in the passenger seat. They talked for maybe 20 minutes. I was too far away to hear anything. Then he gave her something. A thick envelope from a briefcase. Documents, I think. My hands clenched. "Did you recognize him?" "No. Too dark? Too far." "But Blake," she pulled out her phone. "I took a photo. I thought maybe she was having an affair. I wanted evidence in case Jackson needed it." She showed me the screen. Dark, grainy shot through a car window, but clear enough. 2 silhouettes in a sedan. One unmistakably Heather's profile. Timestamp in the corner. 12:47 a.m. the night of the fake emergency. "But after hearing about your troubles," Claire continued, "I realized they weren't meeting for romance. They were plotting something against you." Relief and rage where'd in my chest. "Claire, this is crucial. Would you be willing to testify to the police or in court?" She nodded firmly. "Helen would want me to protect you." Then quieter. "Actually, she asked me to. Before she passed, she said, if anything happens to Blake, if that woman tries anything, keep an eye on him for me." Tears stung my eyes. Helen had prepared allies even beyond Irene. Had protected me through her friends, through people who loved her enough to honor her final requests. I thanked Claire, got her contact information for Caroline and Torres. After she left, I sat in the quiet house and felt the net tightening around Heather. But I wasn't done yet. That evening around 8 o'clock, another knock came at the door. Soft this time. Nothing like Heather's aggressive pounding. I looked through the peephole and saw Jackson standing on my porch alone, shaking, looking over his shoulder like a hunted animal. I opened the door. "Jackson, Dad." His voice cracked. "I need to talk to you. Heather doesn't know I'm here. I don't have much time." I pulled him inside, locked the door. My first thought, is this a trap? Is he still under her control? But looking at my son's face, pale, exhausted, terrified, I knew this was real. "And Dad, I'm sorry." Words tumbled out for everything. For not telling you sooner, for not protecting you. I wanted to every day. I wanted to stop her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive. "I've been recording her for 6 months. I stared at the drive. "Recording? I thought she was having an affair." Shame colored his voice. "I installed a recording app on my phone. It runs in the background. Captures everything. I wanted to catch her with someone else." Al, his hands trembled. "What I found was much worse." Jackson explained hundreds of hours of recordings. Heather on the phone with lawyers I'd never heard of. Planning the incapacity petition. Discussing strategies to access my finances. Conversations with the man Claire had seen confirming a mystery partner. Her exact words, "Dad," all recorded. He quoted from memory, voice hollow. "The old man is easier to handle than I thought. Another Jackson's too stupid to notice anything. Just keep him distracted." I watched my son's face crumble. I heard her dad heard what she really thinks about me, about you, about our family. "Then why didn't you?" I stopped myself. "Why did you stay silent?" "Because she has leverage against me." The words came out broken. "Something she uses to control me." "On what leverage?" He shook his head. "I can't explain yet. Not until I know you're safe. But when this is over, when she can't hurt us anymore, I'll tell you everything." I wanted to push to demand answers. But looking at my son, at the courage it took to come here to betray his wife, to risk whatever hold she had over him, I held back. "Jackson will handle that leverage together. You and me right now." I held up the USB. "This changes everything. You've given us a weapon we didn't have before." Relief flooded his face. Then fear returned. Be careful, Dad. She's more dangerous than you think. The man Claire saw, I've heard her mention him in the recordings. Marcus. She calls him Marcus. I don't know who he is, but they've been plotting this for months, maybe longer. He glanced at his watch, panic rising. I have to go. If she realizes I'm gone. He didn't finish the sentence. The fear in his eyes said everything. At the door, he turned back. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. I love you too, son. I watched him drive away, my heart aching. Jackson was trapped in a marriage that was essentially a prison, but he'd found the courage to fight back. That was something. I sat in the study with two pieces of evidence in front of me. Claire's photo. Heather meeting a mystery man at 12:47 a.m. the night of the fake emergency. Jackson's USB. Hundreds of hours of recordings. Heather's own voice condemning her. A pattern was emerging. Heather had a partner, Marcus. This wasn't amateur desperation. This was a professional operation planned over months. I plugged in the USB and clicked the first file. Heather's voice filled the study. Cold, calculating, discussing Blake Carter like he was a mark, not a father-in-law. Before I could listen for 5 minutes, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The one signed at tomorrow noon. Frantically Brothers downtown. I can help. Come alone. I stared at the message. 2 sources of evidence. 2 warnings about a partner named Marcus. And now a mysterious contact who'd been watching from the shadows ready to step forward. I didn't know who it was, but I knew one thing. They'd been trying to protect me from the beginning. Tomorrow, I'd finally understand why. The next morning, I was still processing everything. Jackson's recordings. Claire's photo. The scale of Heather's planning when my phone buzzed with a reminder. The text from A's noon at Frantically Brothers. I'd almost talked myself out of going, but something told me this person had answers I desperately needed. Frantically Bros was a Pittsburgh icon downtown, always packed. I arrived at 11:50, scanning the crowd, servers shouting orders, the smell of grilled meat and coleslaw, the chaos of lunchtime in a city institution. I was nervous meeting a stranger who'd been watching me. At exactly noon, a man approached, early 40s, but his face was weathered like he'd aged before his time, deep-set eyes that had seen too much pain. His clothes were neat, but worn the careful economy of someone who'd lost everything once and refused to lose it again. He walked straight to my table. Mr. Carter, I'm Aaron Foster. He sat down. I'm the warning you should have gotten 7 years ago. Aaron leaned forward, hands flat on the table. I know what you're going through. I know because I lived it. The midnight calls, the fake emergencies, the systematic theft, the feeling like you're losing your mind because someone you trusted is gaslighting you. I leaned in. Tell me, 7 years ago, I met a woman named Chelsea Brooks. His voice was steady, practiced. He'd told this story before, probably to himself over and over. Online dating site, professional photos, authentic sounding profile, or so I thought. She was beautiful, charming, made me feel understood for the first time in years. Aaron had been divorced, lonely, vulnerable. Chelsea seemed perfect, successful, kind, shared his interests. Within 3 months, I was convinced I'd found the love of my life. She moved in after 6 months. Aaron gave her access to everything, believing in transparency and trust. Joint bank accounts, credit cards, knew all his passwords. I trusted her completely. The way you trust someone you're planning to marry. The theft happened gradually. Small things at first. Charges. Aaron didn't remember cash withdrawals he couldn't account for. Chelsea always had explanations. They sounded reasonable. Then came larger amounts. $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. Credit lines opened in Aaron's name. He'd never applied for loan applications with his forged signature. And by the time I confronted her, she'd taken $80,000. Aaron expected denial, maybe an apology. Instead, Chelsea attacked. She went to the police first before I could. She claimed Aaron had defrauded her, had evidence documents with his signature that he'd signed without reading carefully, had witnesses, people who saw him threatening her. The case was staged too perfectly, too tightly. Aaron was arrested, charged with fraud. His own lawyer told him, "Take the plea deal. The evidence against you is overwhelming." But I didn't do anything, Aaron had protested. Doesn't matter. A jury will convict based on what they see. Aaron served 4 years in state prison. Lost his job as an accountant, lost his career, lost his reputation, his life destroyed. He got out in 2021. Chelsea Brooks had vanished. No forwarding address, no digital trace, like she'd never existed. But Aaron couldn't let it go. He spent every spare hour following leads, tracking patterns. Found the playbook. Chelsea wasn't her only name. She operates in cycles. New name, new location, new victim. Waits years between targets. Lets trails go cold. But she makes small mistakes. And I've been collecting them. He opened a worn notebook, pages filled with handwriting. 6 months ago, Aaron had been searching for Chelsea's face on social media. An algorithm suggested a photo, a wedding announcement. The groom's name was Jackson Carter. The bride beside him had different hair, different style, older looking. But the eyes, Aaron knew those eyes. I'd recognize them anywhere. Mr. Carter, he'd investigated deeper, found marriage records. Chelsea Brooks married someone named Quinn, became Heather Quinn, divorced Quinn, but kept his last name, then married Jackson Carter as Heather Quinn. Same woman, new identity, new victim. And based on your son's age and your assets, I knew who the real target was. Not Jackson, you. Aaron's notebook documented at least 4 other verified victims. Names, dates, amounts, stolen methods used. The pattern was identical across all cases. Gain trust through romance or family connection. Systematic financial access, forgery, fraud, identity theft. When discovered, flip the script and blame the victim. Vanish before facing consequences. Total money taken over 15 years, over $400,000 from all victims combined. States: Ohio, where Aaron lived, Florida, Texas, and now Pennsylvania. I've been watching since I found her here. Aaron said, saw your son's posts getting more worried, more stressed. Saw news about elder fraud investigations in this area. Connected the pieces. I sent you that warning because I know how she operates. By the time you realize what's happening, she's usually 3 steps ahead. He looked at me directly. Mr. Carter, you have something I never had. A son willing to gather evidence. A real police detective investigating resources to fight back. And clearly he nodded at me. A wife who prepared for this. I want to help. Not just for you, but for everyone she's destroyed. The people who couldn't fight back. I asked about Marcus. Aaron's face darkened. In my case, there was a lawyer who helped her, created forged documents, played the legal advisor. I think Marcus might be her current version. These people never work completely alone. Too risky. There's always someone creating the paper trail, providing legitimacy. Aaron offered everything from his own case, court records, evidence, witnesses, documentation on Heather's other victims, some willing to testify. If you're building a case against her, I want in. It's time Chelsea Brooks or Heather Quinn or whatever she's calling herself finally faces justice. Not just for me, for all of us. I reached across the table. Welcome to the fight, Aaron. I felt less alone. Another victim, now an ally. Someone who understood the nightmare from the inside. Then Aaron said, there's one more person you should meet, Mr. Carter. Someone who's known her longest, knows things even I don't. Who? Her father, Eugene Quinn. He's alive, living in Florida. Aaron's expression was grim, and he's been waiting 15 years for a chance to stop his own daughter. We exchanged contact information. Aaron promised to send all his evidence tonight. As I drove home, I understood the scale of what Heather was. Not just a thief, not just a con artist, a professional predator who'd been operating for over a decade. And her own father wanted to help bring her down. Her own father, alive, not dead, like she'd told everyone. A man who'd been searching for his daughter for 15 years, not to reconcile, but to stop her. I didn't know what kind of father hunts his own child, but I was about to find out. And what he'd tell me would reveal the darkest truth, where monsters learn to become monsters. Aaron called that evening. He's here. Flew in from Florida this morning. He says he doesn't want to wait any longer. Wants to meet you tomorrow. The next day, I opened my door to find 2 men on the porch. Aaron Foster and the man Heather had erased from her history. Eugene Quinn was around 70, gay-haired, his face weathered by more than just time. He carried weight in his posture, the burden of guilt and years, dressed neatly, but simply a working man retired. His eyes were sharp, clear, haunted by regret. He extended his hand. Mr. Carter, I'm Eugene Quinn. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I shook his hand, studying his face. You're Heather's father. She told everyone you were dead. His expression didn't change. I'm sure she wishes I was. We sat at the kitchen table. Blake, Eugene, Aaron. I made coffee, the ritual of hospitality despite the tension. Eugene stared at the photos on my wall, at Helen's face. Your wife, she's the one who found me, isn't she? She hired a private investigator before she passed. Left me your name and last known address. Eugene nodded slowly. Smart woman. I wish I'd had the chance to thank her. He began his story, voice steady, like he'd practiced it, told it to himself 1,000 times. 15 years ago, my daughter came to us, her mother and me, asking for help. Said she was in trouble, needed money to start over. As parents, we believed her. We wanted to help. We gave her everything. We'd saved $50,000, our entire retirement fund. Within 2 months, that money was gone. But it wasn't enough for her. Eugene's voice remained even, controlled. She forged my signature on 3 loan applications, drained what was left in our accounts, opened credit cards in her mother's name, my wife's identity. By the time we discovered what she'd done, Victoria, he paused. Heather, whatever she's calling herself now, she'd vanished. They tried to find her, filed police reports, but she changed her name, moved states, left no trail. She's always careful about that. Eugene's hands tightened around his coffee mug. My wife Margaret, she never recovered. Not from the money, from the betrayal. Our own daughter, the child we'd raised, loved, protected. Margaret died 4 years after it happened. Her last words were asking me why. Why did she do this to us? I heard the name Margaret, thought of Helen, understood the pain of losing a partner with unanswered questions. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for yours and for what my daughter has done to you. Eugene set down his mug, looked me straight in the eye. Mr. Carter, I need to tell you something. Something I'm ashamed of. I wasn't always decent. In my younger years, I was a con man. Small scale, nothing violent, but schemes, scams, fraud. I stopped long before Victoria was born. Went straight, worked an honest job. But I'd learned those skills, and I was stupid enough to teach them to her. When Victoria was a teenager, she showed a gift for reading people, for knowing what they wanted to hear, and reflecting it back perfectly. I thought I was teaching her survival skills, life skills, how to negotiate, how to persuade, how to protect herself. But what I really taught her was how to manipulate, how to forge signatures, how to gain trust and exploit it. Every technique she uses now, I gave her those tools. His voice cracked for the first time. I created a monster, Mr. Carter. Everything she knows, everything she's become, I built that. I thought I was preparing her for a harsh world. Instead, I turned her into a predator. And when she turned those skills against her own family, I knew I'd failed as a father in the worst way possible. I've been searching for her for 15 years. Not for revenge, not for the money, for redemption, to make sure she stops, so no one else has to suffer because of what I created. Aaron had contacted Eugene 2 years ago in his own search. They'd built the case file together documenting victims. When Aaron said he'd found her in Pennsylvania targeting you, I got on a plane immediately. Eugene pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. Court records from the Florida theft never prosecuted, she'd vanished. Financial statements with forged signatures. Photos of Victoria Heather under different names across the years. Old photographs. Victoria Turner, her birth name. Sarah Mitchell, Chelsea Brooks, and now Heather Quinn. She recycles old names sometimes. Always maintains multiple identities at once. Always has an escape route planned before she starts. Eugene looked at me directly. I'll testify, Mr. Carter, against my own daughter in court, under oath, whatever you need. You'd really do that, condemn your own child. She's not a child anymore. She's a criminal. And the most loving thing, the only loving thing I can still do is to stop her. Maybe prison will force her to face what she's become. Maybe that's her last chance at redemption. We discussed strategy. Blake, Aaron, Eugene. Officer Torres joined by speakerphone with 3 victims willing to testify, financial evidence, Jackson's recordings. We can build a comprehensive case. Multi-state charges. Aaron, wire fraud across state lines. That's federal. Torres, she's looking at 20 to 30 years if convicted on everything. A plan formed. We needed to catch Heather in the act, get a confession or clear evidence of current crimes. What if I invite her here? I suggested, tell her I want to compromise. Torres, controlled environment. We'll wire your house. Get her talking. Catch her in lies. Record everything. Caroline Wright on speakerphone. A trap with her own words, the evidence, and all these witnesses. She's done. I looked around the room. Aaron, Eugene, Torres on the phone, Caroline on the line, plus Jackson, secretly Claire Thompson, Dr. Stevens, evidence from the bank. An alliance of people Heather had hurt or tried to hurt, all united to stop her. Eugene stood to leave, paused at the door. Mr. Carter, one more thing. Be careful. Cornered animals are most dangerous. And my daughter has always been a survivor. She won't go down without a fight. We had evidence. We had witnesses. We had a plan. But Eugene's warning echoed in my mind. Cornered animals fight hardest. And Heather Quinn had spent 15 years perfecting the art of survival. I was about to bet everything on one final trap. The question was, would she see through it? Day 11. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where this all began, with a 1 a.m. phone call, and started writing the message that would either end this nightmare or prove me a fool. Caroline Wright coached me through every word. Blake at laptop, Caroline on video call. The message had to sound defeated, but not too obvious. You're offering surrender, Caroline said. Make her believe it. I typed, deleted, typed again. The invitation, final version. Heather, Dad's been thinking about our last conversation. You were right. I'm tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being alone. Tired of pretending I can handle everything myself. My lawyer reviewed your guardianship petition. He says your case is solid. The evidence you've gathered, it's comprehensive. I don't want to spend my final years in court battles. Legal fees will drain what's left of my savings. At my age, what's the point? I want to discuss terms that benefit everyone. I'm willing to consider transferring some assets now to avoid prolonged litigation. Maybe there's a way we can resolve this with dignity for all of us. You can bring your attorney if you'd like. Saturday evening, 7:00 p.m. at my house. I'll cook dinner. We can discuss everything calmly, the way family should. I'm ready to compromise, Blake. I sent it at 10:17 a.m. then waited. Heather's response arrived at 11:30 a.m. Dad. Blake, I'm so glad you've thought this through. I knew you'd see this is what's best for everyone. You've been under so much pressure, and we just want to take care of you. I'll bring Marcus. 7:00 p.m. Saturday it is. Looking forward to resolving this, Heather. I stared at the name Marcus, the partner. Walking into the trap with her. Preparation began that afternoon. Torres arrived with a tech team in an unmarked van. They installed hidden cameras, living room with 2 angles, dining room with 3 including close-up on the table, kitchen with 1 entryway recording arrivals, multiple microphones for clear audio, backup recording devices. Everything transmitted to Torres's van parked 2 blocks away. They tested everything 3 times. No room for failure. Blake's panic button. A small device in his shirt pocket. 1 press would alert Torres. Response time 15 seconds from alert to police inside. That evening, Caroline walked me through what to say and what not to say. Don't directly accuse. Let them incriminate themselves. Ask open-ended questions. Let them explain their help. The more they detail their plan, the more they expose their crimes. Stay calm. Play defeated. They need to feel safe. The search warrant was already signed by a judge waiting for probable cause from the trap. Once Heather incriminated herself on tape, immediate arrest. Day 12. We positioned witnesses. Aaron Foster at Claire Thompson's house across the street watching with binoculars. Eugene Quinn in Torres's van listening to audio feed ready to enter on signal. Jackson would arrive separately 10 minutes after Heather, still playing the beautiful husband. Claire Thompson at home with Aaron, backup witness. Caroline Wright at her office, phone open ready to come if needed. Everyone had a role. Everyone knew the signals. The hardest part for Blake, playing weak, defeated, old against every instinct. But remember, Helen had done this. Prepared in secret, struck when ready. I watched Helen's video once more for strength. Her voice, fight, Blake. You're stronger than you think. Day 12 afternoon, final countdown. 3's honored p.m. Torres arrived for last equipment check. Everything working perfectly. Mr. Carter, you're doing the right thing. We'll get her. Anything goes wrong, anything, you press that button. We'll be inside in 15 seconds. I promise you that. 4:00 p.m. I prepared dinner. Had to look authentic. Couldn't reveal it was a trap. Pot roast, potatoes, vegetables, a real meal. Set the table with Helen's good china stabbing my heart, but necessary. 2 bottles of wine I wouldn't drink, but appearances mattered. 5:00 p.m. I prepared myself. Shower, careful shave, cardigan and slacks, looking old, harmless, unthreatening. Practiced in the mirror, tired posture, defeated voice. I'm ready to compromise. Ming said it until it sounded natural. 6:00 Tower p.m. The team assembled. Torres parked the van 2 blocks away. Residential area. Easy to blend. Aaron and Eugene in position. Everyone checked radios, all clear. Caroline texted, "You've got this. We're all with you." 6 to 10:30 p.m. I was alone in the house. Cameras recording. Van ready. Allies positioned. Panic button in pocket. I walked through the house one last time. Every room a memory with Helen. This house. 40 years of life. Love loss. Wouldn't let Heather take it. Walked to the living room. Looked at Helen's photo on the mantle. Said aloud, "This is for you, my love. For us." 6:58 p.m. The doorbell rang. My heart pounded, adrenaline despite preparation. Deep breath, steadied myself. Walked to the door slowly. Had to look frail. Defeated. Hand on the doorknob. Another breath. Open the door. Heather stood there in an elegant black dress, makeup, perfect hairstyled. Marcus beside her, early 40s, expensive suit, leather briefcase, confident smirk, both smiling, predators thinking their prey was surrendering. Dad. Blake, thank you for thinking this through. I played my part. Shoulders slumped. Voice soft. Please come in. Dinner's ready. Stepped aside, let them enter. The door closed behind them. The trap was sprung. I led them into the dining room. Every camera recording, every microphone active. Torres and his team listening to every word. 60 seconds ago, I'd stood alone. Now I had an army hidden in the walls, and Heather Quinn had no idea she was about to destroy herself. They walked into my house believing they'd won. In 60 seconds, they'd learned the difference between a man who surrenders and a man who chooses his battlefield. The cameras were running. The trap was set, and I was about to let Heather Quinn convict herself with her own words. I closed the door behind them. The lock clicked, a sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Everything from this moment forward had been rehearsed, staged, recorded. I was no longer Blake Carter, retired engineer. Tonight, I was the tired father. They believed I was the old man ready to surrender. Heather moved through my living room like she was already measuring it for new furniture. Her eyes catalogued every detail. Helen's photograph on the mantel, the stack of medical bills I'd left visible on the coffee table, the worn armchair where I'd spent 2 years learning to sleep alone. She wore a cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. And her smile had that warmth people trusted right up until it was too late. "Blake," she said, taking both my hands. "Thank you for being reasonable about this." Marcus Brennan followed her in silver at the Temple's expensive suit leather briefcase that looked older than both of us. He extended his hand with the confidence of a man who'd done this before. "I appreciate you choosing to handle this privately," he said. "Court battles help no one except the lawyers." He smiled at his own joke. I returned it weakly, letting my shoulders sag. "I just want what's best for everyone," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm tired." Something flickered in Heather's eyes. Not sympathy, victory. At 7:10, the doorbell rang. Heather's expression shifted confusion, then irritation. "That's Jackson," I said. "I thought he should be here." My son stepped inside, and I saw the strain in his face. Torres had wired him that afternoon. A microphone so small it was invisible tucked into his collar. He kissed Heather's cheek, but his eyes found mine asking a question I answered with the smallest nod. "I didn't know you'd be here," Heather said to him. "Dad asked me to come," Jackson replied quietly. "This affects all of us." Her smile tightened, but she recovered. "Of course, family." I led them to the dining room. The table was set the way Helen used to do it. Cloth napkins, the good dishes we hadn't used in 2 years. Roast chicken in the center, vegetables that would go cold and uneaten. It was all theater, but it had to look real. "Ah, this is lovely," Heather said, settling into her chair. "You didn't have to go to so much trouble." "Helen always said important conversations should happen over a good meal," I replied. For 15 minutes, we talked about nothing that mattered. Heather asked about the neighborhood property values, how long I'd lived here. I kept my answers vague and tired playing my part. 40 years, I said. "We paid $40,000 for this place." Helen thought it was too much, but I knew the bones were solid. That's what matters in a house. Foundation and the current value. Marcus asked, his tone casual. The appraiser said $450,000, maybe more depending on the market. I watched the calculations happen behind their eyes. $450,000 minus whatever they could extract, minus the cost of keeping me quiet in whatever facility they'd chosen. At 7:30, Marcus reached into his briefcase. 3 documents emerged, each clipped together with precision that suggested they'd been prepared long before tonight. "L. Blake," he said, arranging them in front of me like a card dealer. "I've prepared 3 instruments that will resolve this cleanly. The first is a property transfer agreement. It places this house into a family trust managed by Jackson and Heather. You remain the primary resident, but legal ownership protects the asset from future complications." "Complications?" I asked. "Medical expenses?" Heather said gently. "Long-term care. The court is concerned about your ability to manage these things independently. This protects everything for you, for Jackson, for your grandchildren someday." The second document was a power of attorney, medical and financial authority to Heather and Jackson. The third was a consent to guardianship, pre-approving their petition if the court required it. "Sign these tonight," Marcus continued, "and we withdraw the emergency petition. No court, no public record, no strangers questioning your competence, just family taking care of family." I picked up the first document. My hand shook, not from fear, but from the effort of keeping my rage hidden. The language was elegant, almost beautiful in its deception. I would have nothing. They would have everything, and it would all be legal. "This is a lot to take in," I said, setting it down. "Ted," Jackson said, his voice strained. "They're trying to help. The hearing is in 6 days, Heather added, leaning forward. "If we go to court, the legal fees will be 6 figures. Everything becomes public. Your finances, your health, your marriage to Helen. Strangers will pick apart 40 years of your life. Is that really what you want?" I looked at Helen's photograph on the sideboard. Her eyes that had seen through Heather from the beginning. She'd known. She'd prepared. And now it was time. "You're right," I said softly. "I don't want to fight." I stood and moved to the laptop I'd set up earlier. "But before I sign anything, there's something I need everyone to hear." "What is this?" Heather asked, her voice sharpening. "The truth?" I said. My hand found the keyboard. I pulled up the file Torres had helped me prepare, the recording from Helen's USB enhanced and ready. I pressed play. The recording flooded the room. Helen's voice dissolving into something far darker. The gentle cadence everyone recognized collapsed into sharp, unguarded truth. The first clip played and Heather's voice emerged, nothing like the careful tone she'd worn all evening. This was raw, careless, recorded weeks earlier when she believed no one was listening, when control felt absolute. "The old man is easier than I thought. A few more months and we'll have him declared incompetent. Once I have guardianship, everything transfers automatically." The room froze as if the air itself had been drained away. Color vanished from Heather's face. Her lips parted, then pressed tight. Her eyes snapped from the laptop to Blake, to Marcus, to the door, calculating exits, measuring risk, searching for leverage that no longer existed. Marcus lurched forward, palm slamming the table. "Mr. Carter, turn that off right now." "It's not mine," Blake said calmly, stepping back. "It's Jackson's." Heather stared at her husband, disbelief, cracking into panic. Before anyone could speak, the second recording began. Heather laughed, bright, cruel, unrestrained. "Jackson's too stupid to notice anything. He actually believes I love him. Can you imagine? As long as he stays distracted, we can take everything." Jackson collapsed into his chair, shoulders caving. He had heard it before. He had been the one to record it. But hearing it again in front of his father ripped it open like a fresh wound. Tears filled his eyes, humiliation mixing with pain. "Jackson, you." Heather began, her voice sharp. "Keep listening," Blake said quietly. The third clip played Heather's voice, casual, discussing logistics the way someone planned a weekend trip. "Ohio's handled. Records sealed just like you said. Nobody can connect Chelsea to Heather. Different state, different name, different target. This plan can't fail, Marcus." Marcus went rigid at the sound of his own name. The realization swept the room all at once. Jackson had recorded both of them. "This is illegal," Marcus snapped, reaching for control. "These recordings, one-party consent state," Blake replied evenly. "Pennsylvania law." Jackson was present for every conversation. The fourth recording followed the fake pregnancy. Heather's voice again cool and calculating. "He believes anything I tell him. I could say I'm pregnant and he'd start buying baby clothes." Marcus laughed. "That's actually not a bad idea. More leverage." Jackson stood so fast his chair screeched across the floor. "You were never." The sentence died in his throat. Heather detonated. The mask didn't crack. It shattered. "You recorded me," she screamed. "You spineless, pathetic worm." She lunged across the table. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Stop. Don't say another word." She fought him, rage pouring out unchecked. "After everything I did for you," Blake spoke softly, the calm more dangerous than shouting. "Should I call you Chelsea Brooks instead?" Heather froze. "Or Victoria Turner," Blake continued. "Or should I ask your father what he calls you?" Aaron Foster stepped from the kitchen doorway. "Hello, Chelsea." Heather staggered backwards, slamming into the sideboard. Eugene Quinn entered from the hall every year, etched into his face. "Hello, daughter." Her knees nearly buckled. "I'm not your father anymore," Eugene said. "I'm a witness." Marcus understood. Then the trap wasn't closing. It had already sealed. He grabbed his briefcase and bolted. Blake followed him onto the porch. As Marcus sprinted for his car, hands shaking, keys clattering. The engine roared to life. "Marcus Brennan, stop!" Officer Torres shouted, racing in with two officers. Blake stepped behind the car. "Move!" Marcus yelled. "Foot on the gas." "No," Blake said, unmoving. Torres reached the door, weapon drawn. Out of the vehicle, Marcus slumped forward. The handcuffs clicked in the night air. Inside, Heather screamed at everyone. Threats, curses, fury stripped of strategy. Torres returned, badge flashing. "Heather Quinn, also known as Chelsea Brooks, also known as Victoria Turner. You're under arrest for elder financial abuse, fraud, identity, theft, conspiracy. I want a lawyer." "Marcus already has one," Torres replied. She lunged for Blake. Officers restrained her. "You should have died like your useless wife." Silence crushed the room. "My wife was worth 100 of you," Blake said coldly. "She built every protection you ran into. You didn't lose to me. You lost to her." The cuffs closed. Heather was led out, still screaming. Afterward, the house went still. Dinner sat untouched, china gleaming under harsh light. Jackson broke down completely. Blake rested a hand on his shoulder. "It's over," he said. Torres confirmed both suspects were in custody. No bail. Too dangerous. Blake felt no triumph, only relief. Helen had been right. He had been strong enough. Yet, as the night settled, one truth lingered heavy and unresolved. Heather Quinn had survived 15 years by escaping impossible corners. And she still had one final card left to play. The statements would come later, Torres explained. And so would the paperwork. The long legal road that followed moments like this. For now, the house breathed again. Walls releasing years of tension they had silently absorbed. Blake noticed details he had missed. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the smell of cooling food, ordinary sounds returning after chaos. Aaron leaned against the doorway, exhausted, but steady. He had waited years to hear Heather exposed, years of silence spent watching her move from name to name, victim to victim. Eugene sat heavily at the table, hands folded, grief and resolve tangled together. Justice did not erase what she had done, but it finally drew a line she could not cross again. Blake looked at Jackson, at the son who had been manipulated, belittled, and used, yet still found the courage to document the truth. Strength, Blake realized, did not always look like defiance. Sometimes it looked like patience, endurance, and a quiet decision to stop running. Outside patrol lights faded into the distance. The storm had passed, but its aftermath would linger. Courtrooms, testimonies, headlines, those were still coming. Heather would fight, twist, deny, and threaten because that was all she had ever known. And Blake knew deep down that a cornered predator never stopped being dangerous. It simply waited for darkness, searching for one last opening where it could strike again. Tonight would be remembered as an ending, but also as a beginning. Truth had surfaced, masks had fallen, and fear had finally lost its grip. Whatever came next would be faced in daylight with witnesses, records, and resolve. Heather's games were finished here. The cost of her lies would be paid slowly, publicly, and without mercy, as every path she once escaped narrowed into walls she could no longer breach. Justice would not look away this time or ever again. By 11 o'clock that night, everyone had gone home. Torres and his team packed up their equipment, cameras, microphones, the surveillance that had turned my house into a trap. Aaron and Eugene returned to their hotel, drained after years of waiting finally ended. Jackson went back to the house he'd shared with Heather to pack his things to leave that life behind. I was alone. Finally, mercifully alone. That's when I heard the glass break. The hours before had been chaos: statements, signatures, evidence logged. Caroline had called around 10 o'clock. "You did it, Blake. She's finished," Torres reassured me before leaving. Heather and Marcus were in custody. Bail denied. Restraining order active. She couldn't come near me. I nodded, but the unease lingered. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt wired, exhausted, unsettled. The kitchen still held dirty dishes from the dinner trap. The living room looked frozen in time. I tried to sleep and failed. Eventually, I went to the study and reread Helen's files, searching her notes for whatever came next. At 11:17, it happened. Crash. Glass shattering from the basement. My body went rigid. The old house carried sound strangely, but there was no mistaking it. Someone had forced their way in. I could have called 911 and waited. Instead, instinct took over. I grabbed my phone and flashlight and moved quietly to the basement door. The steps creaked as I descended. My heart pounded. I was too old for this. But this was my house, my ground. At the bottom, the flashlight swept across the basement. A figure stood near the broken window glass scattered across the floor. She turned. It was Heather. Her hair was wild. Makeup smeared. Her dress torn. Shoes gone. Blood streaked her feet. But it was her eyes that froze me. Feral, desperate, stripped of calculation. The cornered animal Eugene warned me about. "Blake," she rasped. "Give me the USB drives, the documents Helen left, everything." Her hand shook as she pointed at me. "This doesn't have to get worse." I felt strangely calm. "You broke into my house. You were in police custody 3 hours ago." I shifted my stance. "How much worse can this get?" Something cracked in her expression. "You don't understand what you've done." Her voice trembled with fury beneath fear. "There are powerful people involved. Marcus wasn't the only one." Her tone dropped almost pleading. "If I don't deliver what I promised, though," she stopped herself. I understood then. Jackson's recordings mentioned contacts, a network. Heather wasn't alone. "Who are they?" I asked. She laughed bitterly. "You think this is about you? Your one job in a pipeline?" She stepped closer. "I've been paying up the chain for years and now you've cut me off." Her hand shook violently. "Give me the drives." I disappear. You never see me again. That's when I saw it. The red light blinking near the furnace. The security camera. It was new. Torres hadn't removed it because it was my personal system. "Heather," I said calmly. "Look above the furnace." She followed my gaze. Saw the light. "What is that?" "A security camera. It's been recording since you broke the window." I held steady. Every word, every threat. Her rage exploded. She screamed and lunged. Not calculated, just desperation. I backed toward the stairs. She grabbed for me, shrieking insults. I reached the top and stumbled into the living room. The front door burst open. "Heather Quinn? Hands up." Torres and 2 officers rushed in. Heather spun. Trapped. For a moment, she looked ready to fight. Then something inside her collapsed. She dropped to her knees, hands shaking. "How did she?" whispered. "Silent alarm," I said. "Installed yesterday." Torres cuffed her. "Breaking and entering, restraining order violation. Attempted assault on a witness." His voice was tired again. She glared at me. "This isn't over." "It is," I said. An officer's radio crackled. Marcus Brennan was down the street watching. He'd posted bail and brought her here. Both caught. No bail now. They let her out. She didn't scream this time, just empty. I sank onto the couch as adrenaline crashed. Broken dishes, shattered glass. My house violated again. Jackson arrived minutes later. "Dad, are you okay?" I nodded. "We'll clean this up," I said. "Together." Torres stopped before leaving. She mentioned others. "A network. We'll investigate. But she won't get out again." Dawn came slowly. Jackson and I sat in silence as night faded. It was finally over. Heather arrested twice. Evidence sealed. No escape. I locked every door, checked every window. The house was mine again. Tomorrow there would be a trial. Justice was coming. Winter had settled over Pittsburgh when we walked into the courthouse. Snow coated the steps of the Allegheny County Courthouse, and my breath clouded the air. Beside me, Jackson walked with squared shoulders. He was no longer the man Heather had controlled. We were ready. The courtroom was smaller than expected, wood-panned and heavy with judgment. Judge Mary Ann Walsh presided, known for fairness and zero tolerance for manipulation. The gallery was full. Jackson and I sat with Carolyn Torres, Aaron, Eugene, Claire, and Irene. Media lined the back rows. Elder fraud cases rarely drew attention. This one did. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Brennan delivered the opening statement. Calm. Precise. "This is a case of systematic predation," she said. 15 years, at least 5 victims, multiple states, over $400,000 stolen. The defendant is not confused or misguided. She's a professional con artist who studies her victims, gains trust, and destroys lives. When confronted, she blames them. The defense attorney, Thomas Keating, tried the mental illness strategy. Troubled childhood, trauma, diminished responsibility. Caroline leaned toward me. "They have nothing." She was right. I testified that afternoon, swore the oath. Rachel guided me through everything. The late-night call, Heather whispering in the background. $110,000 stolen, forged credit applications, the fake guardianship petition, the dinner trap, the midnight break-in. Keating tried to shake me. "You're 68, Mr. Carter. Could you be mistaken?" "I'm 68, not incompetent," I replied. I passed a psychiatric evaluation with perfect scores. The report was entered into evidence. Keating backed off. Day 2 brought the victims. Aaron Foster testified about meeting Chelsea Brooks, about love, trust, and losing $80,000, about spending 4 years in prison for crimes she committed. Ohio records confirmed everything. Heather showed no emotion. Jurors noticed. Then Eugene Quinn took the stand. A father testifying against his daughter. He spoke of teaching her deception, believing he was preparing her for the world. "I created a monster," he said. He described $50,000 stolen from him and his wife dying in grief. "I'm here to stop her," he said, voice breaking. The courtroom was silent. Jurors wiped tears. Even Judge Walsh paused. Jackson testified next. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Rachel asked. "She told me she was pregnant," Jackson said. Gasps filled the courtroom. "She said she'd disappear if I betrayed her." He produced fake ultrasounds and pregnancy tests. "I built a nursery. Bought baby clothes." His voice cracked. "There was never a baby." The judge called recess as Jackson broke down. The jury understood this wasn't just fraud, it was cruelty. Day 3 brought evidence. Claire testified about the midnight meeting, presenting photos of Heather with Marcus during a supposed medical emergency. A forensic accountant traced money across accounts, proving Marcus Brennan's role. This was a coordinated fraud operation. He testified. Marcus Brennan testified next under a plea deal. He explained how Heather recruited him. "She needed legitimacy," he said. "I forged documents, played lawyer." He described studying me for months. Widowed, wealthy, vulnerable. She'd done this before, he admitted, at least 5 times. The defense made one final gamble. Heather took the stand. She cried, trembled, claimed Marcus controlled her. Rachel dismantled her calmly. She played recordings. Heather giving orders, presented evidence of fraud before Marcus existed. "Who controlled you then?" And Heather had no answer. She snapped. "He should be grateful," she screamed. "Jackson deserved it. My father taught me." Judge Walsh ordered her removed. The outburst destroyed the mental illness defense completely. Closing arguments were brief. Rachel's final words were simple. "She will never stop unless stopped." The jury deliberated 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. 12 convictions. Elder abuse, identity theft, fraud, forgery, false filings, breaking and entering, assault, conspiracy, witness, intimidation, obstruction of justice. Sentencing followed a week later. Judge Walsh spoke clearly. "You are one of the most calculated predators this court has seen. You destroyed families, manipulated your husband with a fake pregnancy, stole from your father, framed innocence, 12 years in state prison. Parole after 8. Federal charges pending. Restitution ordered $450,000. Assets seized." The gavel fell. Marcus Brennan received 15 years. Heather was led away. She looked back once. No anger, only defeat. She would not be free until past 50. Too old to run again. Jackson exhaled. Aaron and Eugene shook hands. I felt Helen with me. "We did it," I whispered. Justice had been served. What remained was learning how to live again and opening Helen's final letter. That night after the verdict, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The same table where this nightmare had begun, with a phone call in the dark. The house was finally mine again. No cameras, no threats, just silence. And in that silence, I opened Helen's last envelope. Sleep wouldn't come. Despite the exhaustion pressing into my bones, the house felt lighter, as if something heavy had finally been lifted. I went to the study and opened the fireproof box Helen had left. Beneath the USB drives and legal files was the envelope I'd avoided for months. Her handwriting read, "Open this when it's truly over. Not before." My hands shook as I broke the seal. Pale blue paper, her favorite. The words felt alive. "My dearest love, if you're reading this, you did it. You protected yourself. You protected our family. I always knew you had this strength. You just needed permission. I watched you give your whole life grace, patience, kindness, believing people would become worthy of it. That's beautiful. But kindness without boundaries invites harm. Now you know how to be kind and strong. I'm so proud of you. Don't close your heart. I know you'll want to after what Heather did, but that would let her win another way. Don't give her that power. Jackson needs his father now. I know he disappointed you. Fear made him weak, but he's still our son. Leave the door open and let him find his way back. And you live. Plant the garden. Yellow roses along the fence. Read those books. Take the mountain trip. Maybe even find love again someday. You have my blessing. I want you happy. Forever yours, Helen." I cried then, quietly, reading the letter again and again. Each word felt like a release. Helen was giving me permission to move forward. Love beyond death. I framed the letter the next day and hung it beside her photograph. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." Weeks later, as early spring arrived, I made a decision. I sold the big house. Too many memories. I bought a small bungalow in a quiet Pittsburgh neighborhood. A fresh start. I brought only what mattered: her photos, the letter, her blue scarf. On a Sunday morning in March, I stood in my new backyard with 8 yellow rose bushes lined along the fence. The soil was soft, the sun warm. I dug, planted, watered. The work felt grounding. A car pulled up. Jackson stepped out, gloves on, tentative smile. We'd rebuilt slowly Sunday dinners since the trial. Today we worked side by side. I started therapy. He said, "Dr. Stevens referred me." "That's good. It's hard," he admitted, "but I'm learning how I lost myself. How to trust again. That's healing." I said the divorce was finalized. He added, "Relief and grief." "You're mourning who you thought she was," I said gently. "That loss is real." He nodded. I started teaching woodworking at the community center. I said, "Joined a book club." "Mom would have loved that." "I know." I heard from Aaron, Jackson said. He started a fraud support group. "And Eugene's finally at peace," I replied. My phone rang. "Torres, federal charges are filed," he said. "Wire fraud, multi-state identity theft, 10 to 15 years additional." "Thank you. You earned this," he said. We finished planting. 8 yellow roses stood in the sunlight for Mom, Jackson said. She already knew, I replied. Summer came. Mornings with coffee on the porch. The roses bloomed smelling like honey. Books were read. Woodworking class doubled. Sunday dinners became sacred. Irene helped with the garden. Claire still brought pie. One evening, Jackson called. "Dinner Wednesday." "My treat. I'd like that." "You saved us, Dad." We saved each other. I placed a yellow rose beside Helen's photo. "We did it," I said. "And I'm living again." That night, I watched the sunset paint the sky. The house was quiet, but not lonely. Peace earned peace. At 68, I learned the greatest battles are fought with patience and clarity. Age brings wisdom, not weakness. Helen's words echoed, kindness with boundaries is wisdom. I raised my cup to new beginnings. Tomorrow class, Wednesday dinner, Sunday, planting vegetables. Not the end, a beginning. Looking back at my family story, I need to tell you something important, especially if you're someone who believes love means never saying no. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're standing at the edge of losing everything to finally set boundaries. I was 68 years old, 2 years widowed when family betrayal walked through my door, disguised as a daughter-in-law who needed help. I said yes to everything because I thought that's what good fathers do. I thought kindness without limits was the same as love. I was wrong. God gave us discernment for a reason. The Bible teaches us to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. But I forgot the serpent part. I was only the dove and nearly lost 40 years of hard work, my home, and my son because of it. God blessed me with a second chance because Helen prepared the way. But not everyone gets that mercy. Here's the truth about family betrayal. It cuts deeper than any stranger's con because it weaponizes your love against you. It uses your own goodness as the knife. Heather knew I'd give anything for my son's happiness. So, she made his happiness dependent on my destruction. The lesson I learned, the one that cost me $110,000 and nearly my sanity, is this: kindness with boundaries isn't cruelty. It's wisdom. Saying no to manipulation isn't abandoning love, it's protecting it. And sometimes the people who claim they need you most are the ones planning to take everything. This family story taught me that God doesn't call us to be doormats. He calls us to be stewards of our resources, our peace, and our legacy. When someone demands you sacrifice your foundation for their schemes, that's not love asking. That's a predator testing your defenses. So, here's my question for you. Have you experienced family betrayal? Are you struggling to set boundaries because you're afraid of being called heartless?